When baby animals meet baby animals or even other animals of different species during that critical window, the equation is, I know you, you're now familiar, your family, I love you, there's nothing scary, because they're so young, they haven't learned about hunting. They haven't learned about enemies. So everybody is a friend. So if you can introduce them to anyone and everyone at that young age, then anyone and everyone will be a friend forever. So you can have predators and prey coming together in this friendship, harmony, trust, whatever the dynamic is. And it's completely natural for them to do that.
Hey folks, welcome to the Brilliant Body Podcast, a forum to learn about and liberate the brilliance of your body and ultimately to expand the meaning and experience of intelligence. Join me, Mezey, and other body masters to explore pioneering and varied perspectives on what it means and feels like to be embodied. So many people feel disconnected from their bodies due to emotional or physical pain, or even conditioning and lack of education. Others feel quite at home in their bodies, yet want to learn to have more pleasure, awareness, and access to the body's guidance. This podcast is for everybody. Each one of my trailblazing guests has studied their own bodies and others' bodies for decades and will share their expertise and unique mission, how to thrive as a body. So join us and reclaim your body's brilliance. Welcome back to part 2 of my amazing conversation with Dr. Zoolittle. If you haven't yet listened to part 1, we highly recommend starting there to get the full context of this mesmerizing conversation. In the second half, we go into the fascinating connections between humans, animals, and the natural world. So get ready, because it's another fantastic ride. Let's jump right back in. Let's go down into the soil a little bit, because while I'm listening to you, I keep thinking about Merlin Sheldrake's book, Entangled Life, that I've only begun listening to on audiobook. And he talks about the intelligence of fungi and of
Right.
slime, neither of which have brains, and yet they are able to ascertain all kinds of things, make choices, do things that are quite phenomenal and a bit shocking as well. So, of course, we are so brain chauvinistic, you could say, that we always think that having a brain, the bigger the brain, makes you the most intelligent. That, wow, I highly recommend people listen to it or read it. He's describing all these clearly intelligent acts or experiences that these beings, they're not even plants, they're alive beings, are experiencing, sharing, perpetuating, catalyzing, and they don't even have brains or nervous systems as we understand them. So it is mysterious, isn't it?
And I mean, you can take that same argument to a more familiar taxonomic group, the plant kingdom. And we can see that, again, you can run these scientific experiments, you can go and look up the papers, you can read about them with a Google search, but you can take two identical plants that have been grown in lab conditions and they're put in the same environment, same soil, the same amount of water. This is a thermometer in there to measure temperature. The whole thing is consistent. They'll put one in one room and one in the other room. And those two rooms, again, are consistent. They've got all that ambient stuff the same. One of them, they play classical music too. The other one, they play heavy metal music too. That's the only variable, and that's the only thing we're testing for here. And we see that this plant puts out new growth, it flowers more, it grows vigorous, it's lush, there's no discoloration, there's no loss of leaves, whatever. This plant is dead.
Yeah. Yeah. And look at even an ice flakes also responding as if they're
Water, we don't
yeah.
even understand the first thing about water. What is the most mysterious thing on the whole planet? The ability to hold memory, to make shapes, to respond to environment. You start going down that rabbit hole, it's phenomenal. And we've got to remember as well, our bodies are somewhere between 50 and 90% water. Now, that depends on our age and our health. The younger that we are and the healthier we are, the higher percentage our water is. at near death and at death, typically the water content of people is closer to the 50% mark. So one of the golden rules of longevity is to keep your water levels up, because you cannot die if your water levels are high. And I mean that in terms of across your body everywhere. So drinking structured water, for example, is going to be more beneficial than drinking bulk water, because you're then getting it into the cells rather than just putting it through your GI tract. But of course, that's helpful too, because we're going to cleanse toxins and other things. But the point in all that is that we are a very, very large percentage of our physical mass, of physical chemical breakup, is water. And yet here's this mysterious thing, water, that can hold memory, that can carry information, that can transmit that. It's like, okay, what's going on? What super skills do we actually have on an account of our water? We relatively only recently discovered that we have this thing called the microbiome. And there are multiple microbiomes. There's the skin microbiome, the dental oral microbiome, the gut microbiome. They're now finding microbiomes inside the spinal cord, and there's probably countless more to be found. But these microbiomes, they're not us. These are microorganisms. These are protozoa. These are fungi. These are bacteria. These are, in some cases, viruses, working synergistically and cooperatively with the body to assist the physicality of my body to accomplish various things that improve my life, or improve my health. Without a working microbiome in my gut, I can't digest my food correctly. I can't assimilate and absorb my food correctly. I can't make serotonin, which is then transported up to my brain to make me have good moods and be smiley and happy and feel great. I'm not going to have a very good immune system, because 70 to 80% of my immune system is created in my gut system. And without an immune system, I'm prone to getting sick from anything and everything. So without that microbiome working for me, living in me, being part of me, but not actually human, I'm compromised dramatically. So I think we'll find that water is somewhat similar in that sense. It's this thing that is incredibly complex and creative and intelligent based, and we can improve the intelligence of water. You can just go and look at these studies. It sounds so curveball or woo-woo when you first hear it, but there is a lot of very hard science that backs this up. But what does that mean? What super skills then do I have, or what am I taking for granted that I think I can do that is actually the credit of the water, the way that we used to think that we used to digest all by ourselves before we discovered the microbiome? Then we realized, oh, actually all credit goes to that microbiome. You're the ones doing the heavy lifting on that. I'm doing the chewing and my stomach acid's doing some other things. But really, the lion's share of digestion is happening with the microbiome. Well, that's impressive. I can't take credit for that. What's my body doing that I think is me, but is actually the water?
What we're doing is we're choosing what we put in the mouth to chew and what all the beings that comprise us get or don't get. So that's our part. We're the big agent. But, this whole conversation just begs the question of what is the body anyway? And for that matter, what are we anyway? It's just phenomenal, isn't it? I wanted to tell you about a sister technique to family constellation work called walking in your shoes. And a small group of us who practice it went to a zoo. We were invited to a zoo to try to help determine why this herd of gazelles wasn't thriving. And nobody could figure it out. They were just really falling apart, and they were unwell, and they were losing fur, and they just weren't doing well. So we did this very body-based method of somatic resonance or somatic empathy. Each of us took like a different gazelle we were specifically focused on, and we just checked into our bodies, started to walk, and receive the sensational information that started to come in our bodies. And what we were able to determine specifically was that I mean, I'll speak for myself. I was feeling that my ankles, my shins, my hoof, my feet were irritated and inflamed. And there was a problem with the cement, like the asphalt, or not some kind of cushy surface they were reacting to, their hooves were having difficulty with, which somehow the keepers had not figured out, that they were really responding negatively to that experience. And then there was also an interaction, it was several years ago, that had to do with a baby who had been orphaned, and there was an issue with milk and being accepted, and how it was receiving or rejecting a bottle and stuff. And I was able to give them information that they were able to utilize and saw immediate improvements. So I was just wanted to bring that to you too, just how we as intelligent bodies can also tap into bodies that are completely different than our own with all the things we've been talking about, and potentially lend aid and insight to other species. And I imagine you're doing that all the time. It may not be through a specific method like walking in your shoes or somatic resonance. You might not call it that and use it as intentionally, I don't know. But I'm just wondering, what is that like for you when you walk into a holding environment of a wild animal, for example? You must have to utilize all kinds of aspects of your own cells and cilia and sensibilities in order to not upset them and not put yourself in danger.
There's so much to unpack with with that. We could really go a lot of directions, but very quickly on that last point, when going in to work with an animal, they're going to be picking up on a whole lot of signs and signals that I don't even know that I'm giving,
Yeah.
as well as the ones that I know that I'm giving and can take some direct control over. So how big I make my body, whether I come in square to you or whether I come in at a 45-degree angle, whether I show you half my face or all of my face, whether I make myself tall or small, whether I'm wearing camouflage clothes or bright colors, whether I'm wearing perfume or any kind of fragrances on me. And that's a really dangerous one. We don't want to be doing that going in with the animals, because a lot of our fragrances are mimicked or taken from animal pheromones. And so you can be telling them all kinds of things that you don't want to be telling them, and they're going to respond accordingly. Eye contact is another one. Do I hold your gaze or not hold you? It depends. That could be a threat. If I'm staring eye to eye with a cat, that's a threat move. If I'm staring eye to eye with a parrot, that's a different thing altogether. You've got to know a lot of these kinds of things to know what you are and are not communicating. But one of the things that I think is incredibly powerful, and I'm not sure that I could ever prove this, probably somebody has, I just haven't gone in that direction with my research, but going back to what you're saying with empathy, now I would call it a little bit bigger than that. I actually call it love, but it's really
Oh, I love that. That's fantastic. Yes. The ultimate bridge. Yeah.
because I haven't yet met an animal that I don't love. This is easy work for me. So I'm just going to put it in that context. So I can walk into a room with a dog. I can go into a zoo with an animal. I can go into the wild and find somebody in the right. It doesn't matter who, but I'm going to have immediately curiosity about who are you? Who are you, this particular giraffe? Who are you, this little rabbit in the field? This is just how I am made. Doesn't mean it's everybody. This is how I want to be friends with you. I really want to be friends with you. And I have this love that wells up inside. And again, like the electrical heartbeat field going outside of my body, I have the opinion, and this is truly just an opinion, I have the opinion that love is transmitted outside of my body and can be felt in some way, received in some way, whether it's conscious or subconscious, I don't know, but it can be perceived and understood by the animals. So communication technically is the sending of a message from a sender to a receiver, a communication, sending of a message, and it's picked up on the other side. So I've got to be able to have a transmission device. They've got to be able to have a receptor device. So I am one, the rabbit is the second. My transmission is my love. My love is emanating out of me. I cannot stop it if I tried. And it's the sort of thing that can go through walls or whatever. Like, I don't know how it works. This is an opinion, but it can go and be sent as a communication message. And the animal on the other side has some kind of receptor, satellite dish type, some kind of receptor where that message is received, that they probably couldn't tell you that they received it or know what it felt like, or they don't feel a wave over them or anything, but somehow they're, because I find that animals will just respond well to me, and somebody else can walk in who doesn't have that feeling for them, and the animal will respond badly. Doesn't mean that that's a bad person, doesn't mean that's a bad animal, doesn't mean that animal hates that. All these things that we start to put our human value on because that's how we would respond. I don't think that's how it works. I think whenever we feel love from anyone, whenever we feel like you walk into a room at a party where you don't know anyone, and the hostess, who you also don't know, comes up and greets you with a great big smile and says, "Oh, we've been so looking forward to you coming. It's such a pleasure to meet you. I've got someone in the room I'd like to introduce you to." They come and introduce you to someone else, and you just feel great. You don't even know that person. You're not in love with them. You don't have a love relationship with them as family. Like, none of that exists, but you received love from their kindness, from their thoughtfulness, and the way that they welcomed you and valued you as a human, that makes you feel really good. And you're going to have a great impression about that person forever because of how they did that. So love can be felt even when we don't know each other, even when it's not romantic love. So I think that does exist between animals. We know that animals do have love as one of their emotions because we see nurture behaviors, we see grieving behaviors, we see all kinds of things that give us that clue, with these seeking behaviors to go and find this particular one, not just a one, but this particular one. They're bonded. They clearly have that language. They clearly can give and receive it to each other. I believe we can give it and receive it in between species as well. So let me pick up on a point from what you were talking about with the walking in the shoes thing. Again, going back to twin studies or close family, when we have a very close connection, a love connection with another human, we can often feel what they're feeling. Twins will feel like one of them is in a car accident, for example, and their leg breaks and they're squished and they're feeling pretty bad. And the other one will go, "Oh, I'm feeling something. Something's happened to my twin. Like, I don't know what it is, but I can feel it." They've felt it in their body physically. That's a real phenomena. We know as well with heart transplant or other organ transplant recipients that they suddenly now have a skill set or memories, other things that are conveyed from the donor. People who could never play the piano suddenly come out of their operations and they're like, "I really just feel like playing the piano." And they pick it up and they go, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, I can play piano." And so they ask the family of the donor, "Did your son or whoever play piano?" "Oh yeah, he was grade 9 to 3 and wrote concertos or something." And they're like, "Oh my goodness, this skill set has come across." So there are so many different phenomena where this kind of thing is demonstrated that you can't say that you fully understand it, but you can't wipe it off the table and say it doesn't exist, to be able to give and receive love in that way. So I think that's a big part of what we're able to do then when we have genuine affection for someone or another animal, to be able to receive information from them about how they're feeling. Or to be able to have an inkling about, "I think I know what the problem is. Can't tell you why I think I know what it is, but let's do some tests there to find that out."
Yeah. Yeah. And these methods, it's often with strangers. So it's an intentional twinning, if I may say, is really a beautiful and really generous thing that people come together to do. So I love that. Is this how you also would explain then? You briefly mentioned it, interspecies relationships. I was looking at one, I needed this so badly a couple days ago, just a really good animal love video. And I was watching cats with iguanas and parrots with horses and all these different interspecies relationships that are just so heartwarming. But some of them were with natural predators and their natural prey, and they were having such a great time together. And clearly, they were exchanging all kinds of love and cuddles and goodness. How do you explain that? Is it that they are individuals to each other and they're no more going to harm that particular individual than somebody would a family member? What do you think's going on there, that animals actually can get along in that Disney experience that you and I and many of us would love to have, where everybody is getting along with everybody, regardless of how we look and what different body parts afford us in our scales and colors and feathers, etc.
So just go and ask that question one more time, because I started having all Disney pictures in my head and I forgot the train of thought.
Your view of interspecies
Thank you.
harmony,
Yes.
even amongst animals that are normally considered conflictual or predatory and prey.
Yeah. So animal brains have the ability to compartmentalize as well as generalize, the same as ours. Now, they do that on lesser and greater degrees. So, for example, a dog needs to learn when they're very young, in their critical development learning window, that humans look like all kinds of different humans. So there are tall ones, short ones, old ones, thin ones that walk on two legs, ones that crawl, ones that make a lot of noise, ones that wear red, ones that have long hair, ones that wear a hat. When they're little, they have to learn that that diversity exists, because otherwise they will compartmentalize and say, this is what human is based on this one model of a human that I've seen, which is usually the breeder. So whoever the breeder, they can go, okay, well, you're also kind of like that, so you must also be human, and everybody else is spooky. This is why you have dogs with phobias, because they didn't get properly acclimatized or taught. So a dog will naturally compartmentalize much more than a human will. They'll do it sort of almost the way an autistic person is going to be far more compartmentalized in some of their thinking than a, whatever the PC word is, regular human. So we need to understand that animals will have greater and lesser degrees to generalize and compartmentalize. So that's one thing. The second thing is, again, every baby animal will have this critical window. It'll fall at slightly different ages depending on the speed of their development and whatever else, but they'll have a critical window of development where their entire being almost is a sponge. Whatever they're going is, I'm learning, and all of that becomes safe because they feel like they've learned it. Anything that they've been exposed to in that time is now friend or familiar, as opposed to foreign and weird or scary or dangerous or whatever. So when baby animals meet baby animals, or even other animals of different species during that critical window, the equation is, I know you, you're now familiar, your family, I love you, there's nothing scary, because they're so young, they haven't learned about hunting. They haven't learned about enemies. They haven't learned, so everybody is a friend. So if you can introduce them to anyone and everyone at that young age, then anyone and everyone will be a friend forever. So you can have predators and preys coming together in this friendship, harmony, trust, whatever the dynamic is. And it's completely natural for them to do that. If you wait until they're older and they've learned that you taste good, or I hunt you, or you move in a way that triggers my predator responses, but I didn't learn that you're a part of the family, then I'm probably going to go on and get you. And that's a skill set that they need as well. It doesn't mean it's a bad one. It just means we're living in a world where that is how the circle of life kind of thing works. But this was the starting point. And so it's almost like, well, is there a question there that says, is that actually how it's supposed to be? And we've just become into a slightly more corrupt or broken version of the natural world than it was originally supposed to be. There's an argument for that.
Yes. And we can extrapolate that to the human world as well, that in
Right.
segregated societies where people tend to be only in a homogenous environment with their own people of the same color, race, gender, all these things, then we don't tend to learn exactly what you just described. People become othered and enemies, and it's so sad. I mean, it sounds like we all just need to be little puppies together to learn how to get along much more with people who seem to be other species from us, you know?
But we see that in children's studies. Children have to learn to be prejudiced. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not prejudiced. They're not prejudiced for a boy versus a girl. We're just friends. They're not prejudiced as a black boy or a yellow boy or a blue, beard, bit weird. It's only later that becomes a question, that becomes a thing. I mean, Australia's incredibly multicultural. That's where I grew up. That's where I went to school. You don't think twice that half your friends look different from you. It's just they're friend. You just accept, and they're friends, and they're kind or they're not kind. The bully, or they're a friend. And you've had to learn that the bully was going to be mean because you were nice to him to start, and then the bully was like mean, and you're like, ugh, okay, so I learned that one. I'll stay away from him. But you don't have this prejudice against people who look different from you. So I believe that if that's the way we come out, that's the way we enter into life, is accepting and kind and loving and not prejudiced and not aggressive, then that's probably how it's meant to be. And then it's through the life experience of things that are not necessarily ideal, or the value system of other people who've learned through bitter experience, that then starts to color how we then learn to respond and work our way through life. And again, the animals aren't doing it with any malice or motive involved. From their point of view, it is literally just the game of life, survival, whatever. You know, and some animals eat other animals, so they have to learn, otherwise they're going to die of starvation. And so at a certain age, they learn that. But prior to learning that, they learn that they can be friends. And if they learn that they can be friends, then they won't eat that one. They won't attack that one. They possibly won't even attack anyone who looks like that one. So every sheep might be safe to this wolf because this wolf learned that sheep is friend.
Yeah.
And then they look at other sheep and they go, well, you're also friend. I just haven't actually met you yet. But they'll go eat a llama or a donkey or, you know, somebody else.
Amazing. Are there any other things that come to mind off the cuff about what humans can learn from either wild animals or domesticated animals or zoo animals?
Absolutely. I think the very best case in point, and then there's be dozens of things you could do. I mean, just to divert for a second, we've got the whole field of biomimicry. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but biomimicry is essentially as a niche part of engineering, where engineers are trying to solve a problem using technology and things that they construct to have an effect, some practical thing. And so they look to nature to say, how does nature solve that problem? How does nature do this? And then can we copy some of that? So a really good case in point was, I think, the super bullet train in Tokyo or so in Japan. It's just gets you from one end of the island to the other. But when it pops out of a tunnel, you get this sonic boom, because the pressure and the speed inside the tunnel versus the air pressure outside. When you exit that, there's this break point, and you get this judder effect, and they wanted to rectify this in their design. So they was like, okay, let's see who in nature might have a similar issue. They did all their studies, and they eventually worked out that the best case in point, the gold star example, was the kingfisher. The kingfisher who has to change environment from air to water as they jump off the branch, plummet down at top speed at sort of a terminal velocity to get into the water to grab the fish. They've got to change that phase from air to water, and things move differently through one medium than they do in the other. I can't run so fast underwater as I can run on land. There's a greater resistance. So they looked at the kingfisher, and they looked at the shape of the kingfisher and how his bill came out and his feathers were like this, and the shape of his neck and the angle of this and the speed of that. And they broke it all apart, and they said, okay, let's copy that. So they did that. They fixed the train. They did redesign some stuff about the tunnel. Boom, no problem. Comes out smooth, seamless, flawless. That's biomimicry. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can learn from nature in terms of structure and function. And then I'm working in a pioneering kind of field, behavioral biomutualism. So similar concept is, so we will have human problems. So the engineers had a problem with their design. We have a problem with life, for example. So we're not very good at predicting earthquakes. Wouldn't it be a great thing if we could say, there's like the weather forecast, maybe a little bit more accurate, but look, there's going to be an earthquake in 3 months' time. Okay, that would be quite good, because we could then put evacuation plans in place. We could build structures around things. We could do all this stuff. We don't have that skill set, but we have found out that certain deep diving whales, they can detect earthquakes with considerable lead time. We've already seen that frogs can do it, or toads can do about an hour's worth of lead time to an earthquake. An hour doesn't give a city very much time to go and prepare, but 3 months or 3 weeks, I'm just getting a little hazy on my numbers there, but it's 3 something lead time. I think it was 3 weeks, 3 weeks lead time from the whales. They are detecting this. And you got to think, well, then why? How are they doing? What are they doing? And it's like, well, they're underwater. Now, they dive deep. It's pretty dark down there. They're not using their eyes. What are they using? They're using their ears. They can't navigate direction based on the sense of smell. They're using their ears. And they're underwater. Sound carries differently underwater. What's surrounding them? Well, rock. Okay, well, what's an earthquake? Well, it's movement of rock. So we start to put the pieces together and understand what it is that they hear. So the long and the short, without going under too much of a diversion there, is that through the behavior of whales that traditionally would go from A to B, feeding ground to breeding ground, feeding ground to breeding ground, according to the seasons. You need the cold water for the food, you need the warm water for the babies. So they go A to B. And when we see that pod going over here, we're like, why did they go off course? That's not where they're supposed to be. We know then that they're avoiding something here. At whatever point they broke off, they're avoiding that. Why are they avoiding that? Because if they are too close to an earthquake, which is not a quiet event, they're going to damage their ears. If they damage their ears, they can't locate anymore. They can't navigate anymore. They can't communicate with each other anymore. And that's how you get whale strandings, is because they've gone deaf and they don't know where they're going. And because they're a family, the family sticks with them to try and say, come with us. But then they can all end up in trouble. And so you get a whole lot of beached whales simultaneously. It's not because they're all stupid, it's because they were trying to protect one who went deaf and went off course, and the others were trying to protect. So when they're hearing of these rocks grinding as the fault line's about to go and give off an earthquake, the whales are like, we're out of here. We're going to protect our ears. We go over here. So we can tell then, with a fairly high level of accuracy, we're probably going to have an earthquake in this zone, this area. So if that is a coastal area where there's near a city, we can say to that city with 3 weeks notice, as long as we're keeping track on the whales in time, let's prepare. We don't know how big it's going to be. We don't know exactly what day it's going to come, but let's give us a ballpark that you guys may be very susceptible to having it. That's putting significant advantage then back to human safety, thanks to these whales. So that's one example that's very complicated and not very well known yet, but a very simple one that we're all familiar with is guide dogs. There's a human with a problem. They've lost some level of vision so that life becomes more challenging for them. So we ask for an animal volunteer to come along and be their eyes for them. And we train these dogs in great rigorous ways to be able to keep that human safe. And then the bond of trust between those two is absolutely phenomenal. But what we're doing is having cooperation, or mutualism, it's often called in the scientific literature. So mutualism is where one helps each other and they both benefit. Dog gets and enjoys all the relationship and the stimulation of having a job and the sense of achievement and reward and all the pleasure that comes with that. And the human gets their freedom to go out and be independent and have a best friend. And so it's a win-win scenario. So we're learning from the animal, or relying on an animal's skill set to solve a human problem for us. So that's behavioral biomutualism. We've talked about biomimicry, copying. But then I think the cherry on the cake, and I mean, there are other examples too, but I think the real cherry on the cake then is actually unconditional love. Because everybody will tell you that their dog is their best friend. Why? Why? We've got plenty of human friends, family, other people that, why? Because it doesn't matter how broken we are, how much of a bad day we've had, what mistakes we've made, what we're wearing, whether we've put weight on, it doesn't matter. Any of those things, we get the same amount of just endless love from that animal, and we can hold them and cry into their fur, and that they don't have a problem with that. They don't tell us to hurry up, and they don't tell us to smarten ourselves up. Unconditional love is what every human on this planet craves. Every human feels safer and happier and better for knowing that they have unconditional love, knowing that they belong somewhere, knowing that they have value, builds up that self-esteem. It does 100 things. Unconditional love is the key to thriving. And animals give us that. Animals give that to each other. Animals can show us what that looks like and help us become better at giving and receiving that. Because some people find it very hard to receive love because they're so trapped in their thought patterns that they're not worthy, or that they don't matter, or they're unforgivable for what they've done, or these other things. And none of those things are true, but they've believed that because enough people told them that enough times, or whatever other things. So to be able to break that down gently, to set someone free from that mythology of they're not worthy, I mean, the power of animals to do that is astonishing. And we've seen dolphins who have taught mute people how to speak, because the muteness, the inability to speak, came from an emotional trauma, a deep-seated something, that spending time with the dolphins and the way that they played and the way that they loved and the way that they exhibited that set that person free over time. We see children who are terrified of reading out loud because they're going to be judged or whatever else, going and practicing in dog shelters. So the dogs are lonely, the children are struggling with feeling embarrassed about reading. Let's put them together. And so now we have the little dogs who are sitting there in the pound wishing that they've got a forever home. But in the meantime, they've got a 7-year-old there who's reading out loud their book. And the dog doesn't judge them when they get the words wrong or say it incorrectly or read the same sentence twice or any of those things. And the child's confidence goes through the roof. And the dog's there loving the fact that they've got a visitor who's so kind to them and gives them pets and scritches and all this kind of nice stuff. And then we see it in the prison system. Prisoners who have been not necessarily well received by society when they were free caused them to have various life choices that resulted in bad things, and they've hardened their hearts, they've become brittle, and they end up in an institution. But they're not bad people. Sometimes life gives you a bad hand. And so there are prison systems where if you qualify as being a well-behaved enough, a non-violent or whatever prisoner, you can be part of the CAT program, or you can be part of the guide dog training program. And so they bring puppies in, or they bring kittens into the prisons from shelters. So you're rescuing the animals from some death row experience, and the prisoners can relate to that because some of them have been on or seen death rows pretty sharp when you get into the prison system. Somehow these animals can unlock that sympathy thing, and those people who are so hardened start to feel. And they're like, oh, you were on death row, but look at you, you're innocent, you didn't even do anything. I mean, I did the thing, whatever. And it starts to show them, and then they're like, I had to qualify to earn the right to be able to have a pet in the prison. I'm going to take this very seriously. I'm going to work hard and earn some points or some dollars or whatever the system, so I can buy your cat food, so I can buy you some little booties to wear or whatever it happens to be. And they do this, and they start to realize about an economy and about working hard, because they now want to lavish this onto the pet, and the pet is there loving back onto that prisoner who never felt they were worthy, or whose family kind of rejected them, whatever. And this dog's just like, I love you. I don't care that you're in prison. I don't care that you got tattoos. I don't care that you did whatever. Just train me, love me, play with me. This is great. You're the best, awesome person on the planet, right? And that breaks hearts open to receive love. So this, I think, is the very best part of what we can learn from animals. Very long answer to your question, but genuinely, the unconditional love that we all need, that we could all have more of, these animals don't think twice about giving it. They just are there, sending it out.
You got to get a TV show, Penny. I know you're working on it. Gosh darn it. The world could listen to you forever. I so appreciate that long answer. Thank you for every bit of it. It does make me wonder if you're a fan of those little pedal pushy bits that some people get for their dogs. Do you like those? Have you tried
Oh,
those?
the communication buttons?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think they're fantastic. Yeah,
Really?
love them.
And is it pretty easy to teach them to a dog?
Yes. I mean, it takes patience because you're going to be teaching a new skill set.
Yeah.
But positive reinforcement training, which is the type of training model where you reward the behavior or the skill set as it's being acquired when the animal is doing, and if they make a mistake, nothing bad happens. It's a neutral thing. So positive reinforcement training, the principles of that are the same if I'm teaching a goldfish. And I mean that we train some of the fish in the zoo to come and have particular medicine or to be checked over, some of the big fish. So fish can be trained with this. They've trained insects with some of this. This is the same mechanism. If I'm going to train the giraffe or the lion or the dog, or you can arguably say you can even train family members using positive reinforcement training. So the practical steps and how to do that are completely universal. So it's just a case of using an effective training method then to pair by association. And animals are extremely good at doing pair by association. So every time it rains, you just keep saying rain, 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 and you can maybe get some water on your fingertips and sprinkle it over the dog and rain and start to pair this up. And at the same time, be pressing the button that says rain. You got to do repetition, because did you learn anything the first time perfectly? Of course not. So it might look like a simple task or a simple skill set, but remember, they're young. Even if they're older dog, they're still young cognitively. They haven't got to 35 in cognition. They're still at 3 because that's about their ceiling. So we've got to give them the benefit of being 3, even though they might be 18. So repetition is how they learn. But they're going to then go, oh, it's raining. And so then they'll come and tell you, they'll walk into the room, they'll look out the window, they'll see the rain, they'll press the button, they go, rain. And you go, yeah, you learned that. That's cool. Now this world opens up because we can start to connect about things, and then you can go rain, unhappy, or rain, love, or whatever the button is. And then you discover that your dog absolutely loves the rain. And you're like, I never knew that. It's gorgeous. Love it.
I love it too. Are you ever afraid of any animal? Even with all your love beaming at them? Have you ever just been terrified or really felt endangered?
No, I've had some more sobering encounters. There's a bear and wolf rescue sanctuary park. I can't remember its exact name, that sort of sits on the corner of Wyoming, Idaho. I was there in May, and it's many years ago now, but even then the darkness falls quickly and there was still snow on the ground and the light was falling, the park was closing. I was on my way out. And a lot of animals have some level of large enclosure, and certainly under the falling light conditions, you couldn't see a lot of barriers of where the path was and the enclosure started, sort of thing. And I was walking back, and I remember I saw this beautiful, beautiful wolf. And wolves in the snow have so much more mane and fluff and fur and fabulousness about them. And so there's quite some sort of substantial body of wolf, and I couldn't see the barrier. I knew it was there, but I couldn't see it. And the wolf didn't do anything aggressive, but he came over and sort of investigated and then stopped and just held my gaze. If you've ever worked with wolves or heard people talk about working with them, they have this skill that most dogs don't have. Most dogs don't get to the cognitive ability to have the long stare. So we see it in a husky, and just about that's it with the dog breeds. But this is a wolf skill, and they have this thing, the long stare, and they will it feels like they look into your soul. They see and they hold your gaze, and they're not doing anything threatening. So this wolf and I, in the falling light and the drifting snow and how snow gives that muffled sound, it was very, very sensory. And I'm feeling inside a couple of conflicting things. I'm feeling that love of like, oh my gosh, look at your fur, look how beautiful you are. Oh, you're a wolf and I love you. And this is why I came to Wyoming to see you. And it's just like, oh, this level of excitement coming through. And at the same time, I'm going, oh, but you don't mess with the wolf. And we were just like, holding gaze like that. for quite some time, and time goes slowly when you're wolf gazing. It doesn't speed. It's not like in your car accident and little flashes in front of your eye. I mean, it could have been 30 seconds, but it felt like 5 minutes. Like, I don't know. And we just stared at each other. And I was just thinking, you're so beautiful. I love you. Look at you. Oh my gosh, this is incredible. And part of my brain's going, imagine if that fence wasn't there. And part of my brain is just going, I don't care if the fence wasn't there, because you're a friend and you wouldn't hurt me. And I know you wouldn't hurt me. And I don't know how I know that that is the case, but I know you wouldn't. And there's so many occasions in my life when someone's, I can't think of any specifics exactly, but where the lion escapes from the zoo, or somebody sees something on a documentary where an animal's rushing someone, or I don't know. And everyone in the room is like, oh my gosh, I was so terrified I'd run away. And all I'm thinking is like, come here. I can't not love them. I just can't not love them. So if you love, you can't have fear. The two are just incompatible, like the north and the south on a magnet. You cannot push those things together. Sorry, the north and the south, hang on. I can't remember my magnets now.
How do you explain what happened with Steve Irwin?
Well, I mean, first of all, I wasn't there, so
Yeah.
but so here is someone who passionately loves animals too, and is not afraid of them because of the love he carries. When you carry the love, you're not afraid. But that doesn't mean you're safe. That doesn't mean the animal's bad. That doesn't mean the animal is attacking you. That doesn't mean anything other than a lot of animals are not safe. They've got a lot of pointy bits on them. They've got poison. They've got various different things, the sheer size. Elephants can actually be one of the more deadly animals to work with, not because they're going to hurt you, but because they're so big and you can get squashed against the wall, and an elephant's body and you're in a wall. Where are you going? Well, you're the bit that's getting like a pancake. The wall's going to be fine and the elephant's getting right. So they're not getting you, but they're just dangerous animals. And we have to work with that mindset of respect at the same time. And then we have to remember some of those things that are the invisible things, like the pheromones.
Yeah.
I'm not going to walk in and work with big cats wearing pheromones, like wearing a perfume that has some ingredient in it that came from a civet cat or something, because that's going to communicate a whole bunch of things to that animal that I'm not wanting to say.
Yeah.
And that can be misinterpreted. So we just have to work with respect that goes on the cognitive, emotional side of things, but also on being aware, because if we're going into their space, we have to be the ones that take responsibility for that set of circumstances and control that environment and set that up for everyone to succeed. That's on us, because we're the caretaker in that scenario. And again, in the wild, that's on us too, because we're going into their home. So have a little respect. But to answer your question, accidents just happen sometimes. He's a man who loves animals, isn't afraid, because fear and love do not go together. They repel each other. In the presence of love, you cannot fear. It doesn't work. So you can look and respect and say, that's a stingray and it's got some dangerous points to it. I'm going to steer clear of that. Or you say, I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway because I would love to be able to stroke their head, or I'd love to be able to feed them this thing, or I'd love to be able to get that photograph of them, or whatever it is. And that's what happens. And then it might not have even been you. Maybe you're underwater and you're doing this fabulous thing with stingrays and it's all glorious and they're all calm and peaceful and super happy. But then a boat goes past and backfires and they're all like, whoo. And as they go, whoo, what was that? Their tail spins around with them and hits you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an accident. And I wasn't there, I can't speak, but anyone in the zoo world, anyone who is working with animals at this kind of level, we all know there's a risk involved and we all willingly take that risk, because at the end of the day, we're like, so what if one of my friends ends up eating me? Well, at least they're blessed by a good meal. I know it's a bit of a black humor thing, but we kind of Genuinely, the number of zookeeper conversations I've had that fall along those lines is,
Penny, you are an international treasure. I am so honored to have gotten to spend this time with you. Truly, I am just so appreciative, and I know our audience will be as well. Two last questions I ask everybody.
uh-huh.
How do you define embodiment?
Oh
If
my goodness. That was not the curveball I was expecting. Embodiment. The analytical part of my brain is just screaming for a context to be able to give a definition of that. I don't know if you have a context to give.
Well, since we're talking about animal intelligence, go with animals. How are they different as bodies than we are? Not in how they look or how each individual species is, but just in terms of their inner experience. Would you guess? This is so vague and hypothetical, but what is it that humans can learn about being bodies more fully, more honorably and harmoniously? Perhaps is a better question for you.
In that case, I have a good answer. There's this amazing word. It's a German word, and we don't have an English equivalent, and it's called Funktionslust. What it basically translates to is the joy and love experienced from using the abilities that you innately have. Okay, so let me unpack that for a second. If I'm a cheetah, I have this really long tail in proportion to my body that acts as a rudder to control my turning, because I'm going to be pivoting on a dime when I'm going fast. I have really hard toe pads compared to other cats because they're like the studs on football boots or something that are going to be super grippy. I have only got semi-retractable claws because I'm actually, again, going to use that to be able to dig in and be able to turn at sharp corners and stuff. My spine is about as flexy as a wet noodle compared to a horse's back who's always sitting like this, because I'm going to literally put my back legs in front of my front legs when I take a stride so that I can then leap out and go and do the things. So when a cheetah is in full flight, in that experience on the hunt of top speed, there's a whole lot of physicality. There's a whole lot of stuff that their body is doing. And of course, their brain is concentrating, their eyes are looking at, there's 100 things happening at the same time. But when that cheetah is successful in expressing all of that skill set that is innate to who they are, they didn't learn that stuff, that's built into them and their identity. And they do that with a level of accomplishment because now we've got lunch. There is this experienced thing called Funktionslust, where it's just like, I am so awesome for being me because I am unique and I have all of this stuff going on. And look at me just do the thing that I'm supposed to do with all the skill set that I have. They're basically putting their passion, their purpose together for something meaningful. Now, if we could be a bit more like that and embody what our skill set, our identity, and our natural talents for the passion that is unique to us and put that together and go forth and conquer, my gosh, we'd have a happy world.
So the second question I ask everybody is, what do you enjoy most about being your particular body? Or I won't even try to say that German word, or what is your, whatever that word is.
What is my functions list? My
Yes.
functions list, and I was blessed really because I've watched a lot of my friends throughout my life struggle with, what am I supposed to be? What should I do when I grow up? What's my career path? Is this the life that I wanted? All that stuff. I am so blessed that at such a young age had a North Star of, I am here. My purpose in this life is to bring to animals the freedom and joy that, as an innocent individual, is their birthright. Do you know what I mean? That they don't do anything malicious. They don't do anything mean. They don't sin. They don't do evil things. They don't break a law. Like, they are innocent in that sense. And yet they're magnificent and they're fascinating for their diversity and their abilities and this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, the connection is like, there's another being and I want to be friends with them because I want to be able to bless them. I want to be able to give them stuff. I want to give them freedom. I want to give them food. I want to give them joy. I want to give them fun, whatever it is. And I don't care if they give me anything in return because it doesn't matter. I just love you.
Mm.
So that's my functionless, is to go through and wherever possible, show people how they can do something more for their animals, show animals that we have had a very checkered past with how we look after animals. We've done a lot of exploitation. There's a lot of nasty things that go on. There's a lot of nasty things that still happen that I disagree with and would love to have changed in this world. But I can't fight every fire, but what I can do is show a pathway of what is possible and how easy it is to do. We can take away their suffering. We can take away their pain. We can take away their diseases. We can take away their short lifespans. And when I say take away, I don't mean rob them of these things. I'm saying we can protect them from diseases. When you know how the biology of an animal works and what they need to thrive biologically in their physical body, then we can protect them from diseases. We can extend their lifespan to its full capacity. When we know what makes them happy, when we know what is meaningful to them according to their value system and their lifestyle, we can enrich them when they live under our care. We can give them experiences, we can give them training, we can give them rewards, we can give them challenges, we can give them choice, we can give them all of this stuff that means their life becomes super enjoyable and enriched, stress-free, surrounded by love. How could anyone not thrive under those circumstances? And if we're choosing to take them out of a wild situation into either captivity or domesticity, captivity is immediate because we just put them in a space. So you're mine now. Domesticity is over time. We've changed their brain to no longer be able to grow up and become an adult. They always stay a juvenile in their brain and rely on us as a dependent rather than an independent. Every animal out in the wild is independent. They can do their own thing. They don't need our help. But domestic, they do. So either way, we've chosen to limit them. We limit them in their cognitive ability to grow up and be independent, limit them in their freedom to engage in the world and have free agency over what they do. Either way, we're the force factor that has changed their destiny. So it's our responsibility, our moral duty to then provide a life that is as good or better than what they would have had if we hadn't have intervened.
Amen. Amen. So do you feel like your body and your body's intelligence is informing that mission, as you say, or does it feel like it's more coming from your heart and your own vast cognitive capacity?
As a holistic scientist in both mind and body, I don't try and separate mind and body. I am, as I said before, this triune thing of spirit, soul, and body. Yeah, but that's so I can classify that, compartmentalize, to understand, to break it down, to be a reductionist. That's what science does. But experientially, I have unity over all of that. So I can't break that apart. This is me. This is how I'm supposed to be. I've recognized what is in my heart and I've called that out into reality over years of study, years of experience and everything else to create something that I think is worth fighting for. I can't divorce myself from that destiny any more than I can say that my mind and body are two separate things. Everything is coalesced in one. That's me.
I love it. Thank you so much, Penny. And tell everybody how they can find you and what you're most excited about right now.
Well, you can find me at drzoolittle.co. That's my website that doesn't have a lot of information because it's impossible to put this into a website. But this is where you can connect with me, to work with me, whether it's as a zoo consultant, whether that's for your pets, whether that's for the mental health stuff, whether that's for the physical, the longevity, the biohacking, the biomutualism, the list goes on. And what am I most excited? Oh, golly, I'm working on so many things. I've got 5 lions coming over from the Ukraine, from the war there.
Lions?
Yeah. These lions have been rescued from the war. They were illegal pets over there and were subject to bombs and other things that have obviously caused them serious mental health problems, but they're also in physical poor shape, malnutrition and so forth. They're on their way to the UK, and I'm helping the zoo with their rehabilitation and other readjustments. I've been doing a lot of research into things like stem cells, oxygen and ozone therapy, red light therapy. These things are all based on the natural sciences. So these things all exist in nature. We get that from the sun. We get that from our own body or our bone marrow. This is all natural. But the capacity for those modalities to do phenomenal healing is second to none. It's incredibly exciting at how the scale of what we can do to alleviate suffering and disease. And that applies to humans as well as animals.
Just going to say, my life has just been changed in the last 2 weeks from ozone injections, and I'm about to have a guest on the podcast who will be talking about that. So thank you for bringing that up. I just want to thank you again, Penny. You are a marvel, and I hope that you can feel. I'm not a little rabbit in a field, but I'm a little big me over here. And I just feel so much love and appreciation for you. And I am zapping it your way, however that is transmitted and hopefully received. And I'm sure my audience feels the same way. You're just such a gift.
It's really, I mean, I can't fake this stuff. It's such a joy to be able to talk about animals and to show other people some of the things that's possible and what they're capable of, and to help unlock some of those secrets to strengthen your own bonds with the animals that are in your life. And any chance for that is such a blessing. So thank you for the invitation.
I just loved it. And thank you for your generosity of time and spirit and brilliance, truly.
Thanks so much for being with us. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. We'd be so grateful if you could share it with a friend, leave a review, and rate the podcast. This really does help us reach more people in our mission to expand the global understanding, experience, and celebration of body brilliance. And just so you know, our events and content remain free in our effort to expand the meaning of intelligence, but we do gratefully accept donations to help with our operating costs. So if you have a bit extra and feel so inspired, you can find the link to support us in the show notes. While you're there, check out all the resources we've included to help you dive deeper into today's topics. You can also visit www.thebrilliantbodypodcast.com for a complete list of episodes, body meditations, and many more brilliant things. And if you're curious to explore how I work with clients and students to reclaim body brilliance, visit my website at www.alimezey.com. And lastly, a huge hearty thank you to my co-producer and co-editor, the brilliant Florence Popoff, and to Blair, Mr. One-Man Band Wilson, for our theme music. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, stay loving, and reclaim your brilliant body.